Okay, we're excited to have Björn Orvar. He's the co-founder and chief scientific officer at ORF Genetics, joining us for a chat with Protein Production Technology International. Björn has been at the forefront of developing plant-based growth factors, playing a key role in advancing cellular agriculture. We're looking forward to hearing his thoughts on how ORF Genetics is shaping the future of sustainable protein production. Björn, welcome to Protein Production Technology International.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you here.
It's great to have you with us. Now, let's start with a bit of a background. Could you tell us the story of ORF Genetics? What inspired its founding, and how did you personally get involved?
Well, ORF Genetics was founded in the beginning of 2001, so we have been around for almost 25 years. Mm-hmm. The background is that I did my PhD in molecular genetics in University of British Columbia, Canada. And me and my colleague, we decided to work on molecular farming from the get-go, start a company in Iceland, and to see what we could do with this technology. So the idea was always from the to use plants to produce novel proteins.
Mm-hmm. So for readers who might not be familiar, how would you explain plant molecular farming in simple terms?
Yes, this is by you use genetic engineering to produce in plants novel, usually specialty proteins or compounds that can then be purified and used for different applications, such as in pharma, to produce proteins for research and development, in cosmetics, in food processing, and so forth. So it's a powerful technology.
Yeah. I mean, what sets plant molecular farming apart from other biotechnologies like precision fermentation or cell cultivated?
Of course, using plants to produce novel proteins has not been developed for such a long time, like, let's say, using E. coli yeast system and so forth. So it's a relatively new technology. So this technology has a lot to catch up in terms of if you compare it with precision fermentation and things like that. But you are using plants, and it's a very inexpensive platform to produce proteins. If you compare it with precision farming, where you have to use bioreactors, steel tanks, and things like that. So it has a lot of potential because it's so inexpensive to produce the protein.
And why should people care about this technology, Björn?
Well, I mean, we can see how this technology can achieve a lot of things that we need. It can be very important as a contribution to our climate change, sustainability, and so forth. Produce proteins such as for cultivated meat, where we are, for example, producing animal growth factors for cultivated meat to bring down or reduce the footprint of traditional meat production and so forth. So the possibilities are just endless with this technology.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned before that plant molecular farming has got applications across different industries, from cosmetics to pharma and food. So what led you to focus on food applications specifically?
Yes, so the idea of using cells, produce meat from cells that are extracted from a tissue sample from an animal of interest to produce meat is really a novel idea. And but to be able to do this, you need so-called growth factors to use in this technology, in this production. And growth factors today are very, very expensive because it's difficult to produce them. We saw that our system is more or less custom-made to produce growth factors at a very low cost, but also at a huge scale. And we are talking about producing growth factors at a scale that you've never seen before. Mm-hmm. So we think that our system platform is very much suitable for that.
And do you see the food sector as the biggest growth area for plant molecular farming in the coming years?
Well, of course, there is a lot of challenges ahead in cultivated meat, for example, but we do see those companies really moving fast in their development. If cultivated meat takes off, that would probably be the largest contribution of plant molecular farming, because you need those proteins, as I said previously, you need those growth factors at such a huge volumes that no other system, I think, is capable of producing it as in this volume.
Now we're going to get into the technical aspects now. What plant species are you using for your process, and why have you chosen that one over others?
Yes, we decided to use the barley plant to produce those specialty proteins. More specifically, we genetically engineer the barley plant to produce it in the seed, barley seed. And the reason is that the barley seed has all the protein processing of nature to produce proteins. So we really wanted to use this natural capabilities of the barley seed to produce those proteins. Secondly, if you manage to produce the protein in the seed, you can actually store the protein more or less indefinitely. And this can be intact, and this can be extremely important for stockpiling difficult proteins and things like that. But thirdly, barley, to bring down the cost of such, let's say, animal growth factors for the cultivated meat industry, you really need to be able to cultivate these plants outside in the field. And to do so, you need to have a plant that is so-called biologically and ecologically contained, meaning that the plant is not cross-pollinating neighboring plants, ecologically contained, meaning that it's not an invasive species. And barley has these really important characteristics. It's biologically and ecologically contained. And this has made it possible for us to apply for in-field permits because of the system. And we have been, for example, producing or doing in-field cultivation in Canada for 13 years. And we are just adding Argentina and Chile to this in-field cultivation. So this is very important part. So very few species actually would be allowed in field because of this this need for this containment. And then finally, barley is not very demanding on climate or soil or anything like that. So you basically can cultivate barley everywhere, even here in Iceland, where the climate is not favorable. And this means that if you're going to cultivate in large scale in field, you're not competing with prime agricultural land like you would have to do if you are using some other plant systems.
Did you experiment with other plants along the way, or is it barley from the start?
Well, I did my PhD in tobacco plants, so I know everything about the tobacco. When I was thinking about it, I saw that barley would have really a huge advantage over the tobacco plant. Actually, we also started in using potato and microtubers, but then we moved into the barley plants.
So you probably explained it there, but what would you say makes ORF Genetics platform unique compared to others in this space? I'm not going to mention any names, but you said some companies are using tobacco plants, some companies are using potatoes, some companies are even using soy.
Yes. So first of all, we have been developing and optimizing this system for 20 years. We have been using this system to produce human animal growth factors for 17 years. So we have some advantages there. And secondly, we believe that because of this seed production, using the seed as the bioreactor, and in such and using inexpensive in-field cultivation and so forth, we believe we have an advantages over some other plant systems. And also what we have found out is that in terms of animal growth factors, producing animal growth factors for cultivated meat, we made this discovery in 2019 that you do not have to highly purify those animal growth factors for them to work perfectly well in cell cultures for cultivated meat production. So this means that the downstream processing cost is just a fraction of if you had to highly purify those proteins.
Now, your longevity in the sector actually makes you unique anyway. There's not many other companies that have been anywhere near around as long as you guys have. Is there a particular breakthrough or approach that you're most proud of during that 20 or so years?
Well, when we started our company, there were so many plant molecular farming startups at that time. We decided to take a slightly different route. Most of these companies were focusing on few proteins, mostly pharmaceutical or candidates for pharmaceutical development. We decided to stay away from that. Rather, we focus on the platform, production platform, and then we focus on a group of proteins, growth factors, that actually can enter many different markets, and these markets have different entry barriers. So we started entering a market, R&D, medical research and so forth, with our first product line that we launched in 2007, and it was actually the first time that a plant company developed a portfolio of those proteins to commercialize. That was the so-called low-hanging fruit. Fruit. And then we actually moved into another group of proteins. These are human growth factors that are important for the biology of the skin. So we entered that market, and we actually did launch our own skincare brand just to show the potential and so forth of using human growth factors produced in plants and so on. And this product became quite successful, and we used this success to develop other side projects, so to speak. And one of them is actually our animal growth factors, so-called mesenchyme, for cultivated meat.
Now, scalability, I've learned, is a big challenge in this field. How have you addressed the scaling issues that others in molecular farming often struggle with?
Yeah, one of the things that we decided on early on, we do not use in our technology development anything that is not scalable. We first look into this technology. Is it scalable or not? So that has been very important. And also in terms of these growth factors for cultivated meat, we look into food grade equipment just to keep down the cost and so forth. Then we have, as I have explained about our system, it is very productive. And so our production capacity is quite good, and we always try to stay slightly ahead of the market. Now I'm talking about the cultivated meat market in terms of production capacity. So already we are in volumes that probably not many companies are capable of doing, and we can see it's a modular operation. Relatively low tech modular operation, so we are not concerned about the scalability, and we have actually set out specific goals in terms of where we want to be in scale, and we are just following that.
Now, regulatory approvals, they're also tough in this space. Have you achieved any major milestones like GRAS status or EFSA approval?
Well, we've been following closely what is needed, and again for the cultivated meat, and so far we decided not to apply for any specific like GRAS status or anything like that. We choose to just work closely with those cultivated meat companies that are using our growth factors. They are communicating with regulatory authorities in different markets. So the data these regulatory authorities ask, we provide that data to the company of interest. And so far this has worked quite well. We already have one product on the market in Singapore and Hong Kong. Now I'm talking about cultivated meat that is produced with our growth factors. So it has worked quite well so far, and we learned a lot through this process. what data is needed and so forth. And we expect that other companies that are using our growth factors have submitted or are preparing submitting food dossiers with our growth factors will probably follow a similar path.
You mentioned a couple of partnerships there. Are there any others that you can share, particularly ones that validate your technology?
Well, of course, we are very proud to be a part of the products that WOW is producing for Singapore and Hong Kong. WOW is actually quite an amazing company. There are other cultivated meat companies in the pipeline, and I cannot reveal which one, but hopefully we will see some market like these companies, of course, are waiting for the market approval, and everyone is. Yeah.
Of course, we know that WOW has submitted its dossiers to several countries at the same time. So hopefully your products will be seen on the shelves soon. So how critical are those collaborations for moving forward from concept to commercialization?
Well, we decided early on to work very closely with all those startups. Work with them. We have been providing free samples because it was a tough sell in the beginning. Now I'm talking about 2020 when we actually launched our Mesocan portfolio of animal growth factors. It was a tough sell to most of those startups because they were used to using highly purified growth factors from very well-known suppliers, usually derived from E. coli or yeast. But to go to those companies and ask them, okay, would you like to try plant-made growth factors? And they're not highly purified. In the beginning, it was a tough sell. But now, and just to encourage them to try, we have we get them free samples, and where they could compare our growth factors with some other growth factors from other suppliers, and based on that, they actually gained some trust in this approach. So this was actually quite important to do.
For companies and innovators listening or reading who might be considering plant molecular farming, what advice would you give them about navigating this space, Björn?
Well, of course, it's always good to work closely with some universities and use known technology and things like that, and what you can add to a known technology. And if you're producing these proteins in plants, you have to be very selective what plants you're using. I would put some effort into evaluating what plants you're going to use. I would say these two things are very important.
And what's the one thing you wish you'd have known when you started that you now know?
Well, one of the things that have always been frustrated from the get-go is the GMO issue, so-called. It is in the beginning, we didn't want to go into producing or developing plants that had some agricultural features and things like that because the anti-GMO sentiment was so strong. We didn't want to take that battle. But I didn't realize, now I'm talking about the year 2000, I didn't realize how the GMO issue would stay so long in the mainstream media, among politicians and things like that. At the same time, when scientists have came to a different conclusion, so that the scientific approach on GMO that has not been. That it didn't win over these politicians or general public. That is a surprise to me, definitely.
Just a couple of questions left now, Björn. What's next for ORF Genetics? Are there any upcoming projects, partnerships, or milestones that you're particularly excited about? I know you had a tasting recently, didn't you, in Iceland? Did you have a cultivated meat tasting?
Yes. So what we are what we are focusing on now, in addition to scaling up according to the demand from those cultivated meat companies, the one thing that we have been doing is to offer cultivated meat companies, to come to Iceland to have a tasting event. customers, for example. And we have already had 3 different companies coming to Iceland, having tasting events here, where we have the opportunity to invite important people, stakeholders, and things like that. And this has been actually quite successful. And the system, or how can I explain, the process of having tasting events in Iceland is relatively simple and easy, and also because the government has been very favorable towards cultivated meat and so forth. So we want to really put Iceland on the map as a good place to test cultivated meat, and hopefully in the near future to produce cultivated meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the landscape seems to have changed. The USA and Singapore were leading the way. Things seems to have stalled a little bit in the USA, given the change in administration there. But Europe seems to be a bit of a hotbed now for cell-cultivated meat, and the UK could even be at the forefront of that. So you never know. You never know. Just for fun, Björn, if you could fast forward 5 years, what do you hope people will be saying about plant molecular farming? What's the big vision you'd love to see realized?
Well, I would say that people might think, okay, why didn't we start using this technology earlier?
Mm-hmm.
We missed. I have to be honest here. I think we have missed about 20 years.
Yeah.
And we have to catch up.
Yeah. Well, Björn, thank you very much for sparing some time to speak with us. It's been fascinating catching up with you. I know that we've featured you before in the magazine, but it's always good to follow companies' journeys throughout their development. So it's been lovely catching up with you.
Well, thank you for inviting me very much.
See you soon.
Yeah, bye-bye.